Hey, everybody.
Hello.
We're going to give everybody a little bit more time to make it in before we launch in because we're going to have a little more traditional version of what we usually do for class. It's going to be a little bit of workshop, and y'all can take notes. I would recommend you take notes as we go through it. I will have the recorded version that we'll put up, but I find it's always better to take your time, ask some questions, and you'll be a little bit better off. Let's see here. All right, let's see. We're just missing, let's see. There's Daisy. Okay. And I think we're missing Luciana. But maybe she'll be in just a bit later. So we go ahead and launch into this. Okay, y'all. So what we're going to be moving into next is functions. We're going to spend some time with functions. And I know you guys, some of you have already started working with functions. You've kind of seen them. You understand somewhat how they work. But I'd like to spend some time with them because functions are something that you're going to use. It's basically the beginning of how you're going to really start to utilize Python or any programming language. A lot of times you're using a main file, and then you're going to have a separate file that's going to have a lot of the functionality you're going to be working with. It's a good way to segment your code so you can make sure that everything that you're working with is, there's Luciana, she showed up. As I was saying, functions are a good way to segment your code so you can keep ideas and certain functionality in a completely separate place. And then you can work with everything else kind of on its own in that main set of code. So let's take a look at a few things here. And if you would, the main thing is I just want you guys to feel comfortable what we're starting here. So we're going to start adding in some more layers as we go with these functions. But let's just jump into this real quick. Let me share my Python screen with you guys real quick. Actually, you know what? Let me go through the assignment. It's a little different than what we're going to be doing for our example. So I think that might help you guys frame what you're looking at so you can ask questions and things like that. So let me go ahead and share that agenda. If you haven't already taken a look at it, it's here. The assignment is called Welcome Avengers. Okay. So in the end, at the end of this, what I'll need you guys to do is build a function that will take in the names, take in this list of names. You need to make a function that will create this welcome message that will be printed out with each of the person's names. And from that list, you'll want it to, since you're going to have to execute it once, you're going to need to use a looping structure. Okay. And we can talk a little bit about that if you need to. The code should then put out, welcome to the Avengers, Olivia Wilde, look forward to your heroic deeds. Next one, John Mulaney, Joey Diaz, Tom Holland, Kamala Khan. All these people down the list. So once you hit play, this output should be what you see without having to hit play again. Of course, a lot of people working with PyCharm, it won't hold on to your previous stuff that you added in. You're going to have to, it'll erase it. It'll clear it. If you're using PyCharm. Pythonista, you have to kind of clear it, but you're going to see stuff in between every time you decide to run it. So let's go ahead and take a look at some of the aspects of a function. So a lot of times, if we were wanting to do something, let's say, for instance, we're going to be making something that will run through a list of values. Okay, so let's just do value list. Whoops, sorry, I am not sharing my PyCharm screen. Give me just a second. There we go. Okay. So everybody should see that now. Can everybody see my PyCharm screen? So give me a little thumbs up there so I make sure everybody can see what we're seeing. Thanks, Camilla. Appreciate that. All right, Cameron, appreciate it. Everybody else doing okay? We'll make sure you guys are catching what we're putting up here. Also, you know, I did mention before, I really think you should take notes, mostly because there's always a possibility of something going wrong with the upload. So please take notes. I think it's really going to help you out later. Okay, so we have our value list here. I'm going to just put this in a list. Let's see, 2, 3, 5, 6, 10, 22, 12, and we'll put it in an extra one there for 3. Okay, so usually if we wanted to move through this list, we would use like a for loop. Okay, so for I in value list, put a colon there at the end of it, and we just have it print I. Okay, or in this case, we could go a little bit further, and we could say this value is in the list. Okay, so when we start running Scratch here, this is the name of the Python file I'm running right now. If I run this, I'm going to get that problem because I didn't put in my last quote. That's okay. Actually, I need to do that. Okay, try that one more time. There we go. And it just spits out our list, right, as you can see down here. So value 2 is in the list, value 3 is in the list. Now this is fine if what you want to do is just spit out a list, but more and more we're going to be needing to work with the stuff that's in the list, or we're going to need to work with the values that are being inputted for us. So in this case, let's say what we want to do is we want to take this and, you know, it's an option a lot of times that I'll pull out, but if we wanted to do a grocery store thing, we wanted to add in tax for each of these. So what we'd have to do here is if we wanted to use this, we would say, okay, well, if this is going to be calculating tax, then what I want to do is take, let's see, tax amount. So what I'm going to do is actually get the amount for the tax, and then I'm going to print that out next to the value. So I'm going to call that tax, and then we're going to take I times 0.0825. Now, some of you might be thinking, hey, Hammond tree, you're probably going to have to force a variable type here, but let's just see. Okay? Some of you might be thinking that. Not everybody, I'm sure. All right, so let's change this to the tax amount for I is tax. And notice I am using the Python 3 formatting setup for this. So the F at the very beginning, quotes, or using the curly brackets where we're going to show those things. Okay, so that should probably take care of that. Okay, there we are. 0.16. That sounds good. Everything looks pretty good there. $1.82 for the 22 value there. And for all the people that are looking at this right now, how can I change this into something that will only show 2 decimal places? Can anybody tell me? I've got all these decimal places running out quite a ways. How can I get this?
The round function.
Okay, how do I set that up?
So I believe you would multiply your number by 100. Variable tax.
Okay. Well, I mean, I want the actual tax value.
Yeah, and then you would round that number and then shift it back down by dividing it by 100. Okay. That's how you control what place it rounds to.
Right. I could also just use round, as we see here, and then say, I want to use the tax value, and I want to have it rounded to 2 decimal places, like we have there. So I can have that done this way. Yeah, a little easier, if you already know it. And we're going to use this one quite a bit, so I'm going to bring it up. Okay, so later on, when we have something that's calculating other values, or we want to make sure we're rounding to a certain decimal place, we might even just say, we don't want anything. We just want to have the very basic. That would take us to our first place in there. But in this case, I really would like to see the cents that are involved. So we want to see everything there. Okay. All right. So we have all this. Now here's a problem. If I want to use this somewhere else, I got to write it again. And chances are I might need to calculate tax on individual items depending on what kind of discounts they've got, or maybe I'm trying to measure how much weight this truck is coming in with, and I need to be able to keep the truck separate. So I'll need to make sure that I have the same functionality every time it comes up. So they pull on, you know, I weigh the truck, see how much weight they are. Are they safe for this road? Are they? Cool. Okay, let's go ahead and change some of the load. Let's see if we can alter some of this. So I'll need to have this over and over again. In that case, it's a perfect option for a function. Okay. If it's something you know you're going to need to do again, then already we're starting to screw with that dry idea with don't repeat yourself. Okay. So in that case, we're going to need to make a function. All right. So the way to make a function is you always want to have it above where you're starting to use it, where you're starting to call it. But just like variables, just like anything that you're going to state and use later, it's always a good idea to have it at the top, just so anybody who comes in and has to maintain your code or change your code, they can always find what they need. So in this case, I'm going to make our function way up here at the top. And a function starts off with def. That's where we define our function. Okay, so def. And let's say we're going to call this one, actually, I'm going to do this a little bit different. We're going to give it a little different setup. We can still use value list as is. Instead of this, I want something that's going to calculate the area of a circle based on these values as a radius, just to kind of show you guys different ways to do this, okay? So define, let's see, circle area. Okay. And then we'll put two parentheses here. We're going to close it with a colon, and then we can get to work on what we're going to be working with. So to define a circle, we need to give some information back. So right here we can print. Now I'm actually going to do this as a print first, but I'm going to show you how we really need to do it in just a second. But I think you guys will follow along with the print option here pretty easily. Okay. So we're going to print, and we're going to want to put out the area of the circle with radius. So, oh, we need to pull in some information. Automatically, we know we need to give some information to the function. Okay, now you can call a function and have it do something without having to pass it anything. So let me kind of show you what that looks like. Let me comment this stuff out. Okay, so our first function is going to be, let's see, just something that'll be easy for us. Say hi. I'm just going to call it that. And say hi, all it's going to do is print, hey, how's it going? Okay, now I'm going to have it print, hey, how's it going, every time we go hit a number on this list. So can anybody tell me how many times we're going to print, hey, how's it going? Anybody got any ideas?
8.
8? Okay, I think that was Cameron says 8. I believe you're correct because we start off at 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. But since we started counting at 0 instead of 1, that would actually be 8 values. So we should see that happen that way. Let's take a look. We're just using the index to say how many times we're going to print. Hi, how's it going? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay, yep, that's it. Good stuff. Okay, so we can call functions to just have them do stuff. You know, they could reach out and they could grab a date and time. They could be reaching out to do something where we don't necessarily have to pass them anything. Now, if we do need to pass them something, I can comment that out. There's our function back again. Okay, so if we need to send it some information, when we call that function, like we're going to do here, circle area, we need to send it some information as well. Okay, now there's some vocabulary that goes along with what we send from where we call it and what we actually are looking to receive when we're looking at the function itself. Okay, so circle area, we're going to use whatever is in that list at that point. Now, that's going to mean 2, 3, 5, 6, 10, 22, 12, all these kind of things, okay? So in this case, it's I. And what we're sending over, since we're looking at the area of the circle, anybody tell me what the area of the circle is? What's the formula for finding the area of a circle?
Pi r squared.
Pi r squared. So we need the radius. So we can call this up here, where we are actually defining the function and we're getting that information, we call this something different than what we call this here, okay? So when we call circle area, this is the call in the main code. We call this the information that we're sending to the function is called an argument. Okay, so if I say, hey, let's look at the call and see what arguments you're sending. Okay, now when we're looking at the actual definition of the function, then we're looking at a a property. Okay, so up here, I'm sorry, not property, parameter, X out property, parameter. They just both start with a P, so I got them mixed up there for a second. Parameter. So if you're looking at the definition of your function, it's called parameter. So if I say, hey, we need to take a look at your parameters, see what you're pulling in, then we're looking at where you're actually building your function, okay, where you're defining your function. Okay. So we pulled in radius. So print the area of the circle with radius, and then we can just put in radius here. And you'll notice once we use it, radius lights up. So it's like, all right, great, you're using it. That's awesome. The area of the circle with radius is, and we can do our calculations here. So we're going to do, let's see, it's pi r squared. So pi is 3.1459 times, and then we're going to put this in brackets. Now, here's the way to do exponentiation. If you guys are not familiar with this, there's a couple different ways we can do this. Since we're doing r squared, which is our radius squared, we could always do this, radius times radius, and this should work. Really, that's gonna give us r squared. That's gonna give us what we want. However, more often than anything else, since this is more keystrokes for a coder, they're gonna do it like this. Put in an extra one there, and then 2. So what that does is it says, all right, we want the square root of this, or I'm sorry, not square, the square of this. Okay, so if you needed to and you want to get the cube, then you have the 3, and you just keep changing it from there. But this is how you do exponentiation inside of this. So we'll may get into some other use of exponentiation later on as we work. Definitely, if you get into data science or machine learning or anything like that, this is going to be something we're going to use quite a bit. All right, so we have print the area of the circle with radius is, and we've got everything here. I think that works. Does anybody see any possible issues? Going to call circle area. We're going to send the radius. We're going to get all that. I think we look okay. Go ahead and give it a shot. Aha, okay, so we're looking pretty good. Does anybody want to check my math and see if I'm right? Let's see, I'll just do it on my handy dandy phone calculator, because I don't do these sort of things in my head. I don't know if anybody does. So 3.1459 times, now 2, the square root of 2, or the square root of 2 should be 4. And I got 12.5836, and that's what we're showing here on our screen. So that should be good for everybody. And let's see, Zanetta, how am I going to get this thing to show me only 2 decimal places? We just went over this one. Can you remember?
Yeah, I can hear you. You have to round it because.
Do that. Where should I do that? Where should I do that?
You should round it like where the radius is, like where you actually put it.
Okay, so like the radius right here?
Yeah.
Right there, I should round it right there? Okay, I guess I could. I could do round, could do that, and do 2 decimal places. Let's see what we get. Okay, not much difference because we didn't have any floats to begin with. So it's not gonna really change much for us there. Mostly just looking at the one that actually has a lot of trailing decimal places. So how would I change that? Anybody help out Zanetta with that one?
Could you put it before the 3.14?
I could, yeah, I could do that, round. And then we could do 2 and close it off again. Let's see how we do now. There we go. Now we're getting our 2 decimal places. So we're looking a lot better. Okay. It's probably a little easier to see. Right. So this is a very basic introduction to functions. Let me go ahead and go down my list here on the windows that I have up right now. And let me just ask you guys a few questions. So Brianna, first question is, whenever you're calling your function, like we're doing here, this is where we're calling our function. What's the name of the information that we're sending to the function? What's that called right here in the call? What is that called? What's our vocabulary word for that? Any ideas? Okay, if Brianna doesn't get it, we're moving down to Will. So we'll be ready just in case we don't hear anything from Brianna.
Sorry, what was the question, man?
Okay, so you see where I have the I highlighted there on the screen?
Uh-huh.
Okay, what is that called whenever we're calling the function and we're sending information to the function? That information we're sending, what is that called?
Nicholas? I don't think I remember.
Okay, Will, can you help her out?
I'm not totally sure either.
Okay, sounds good. Let's just keep running down the list here. Zanetta, could you help them out? What's that called?
Wait, what was the question again?
Ha! Oh, that's no good. The question is, when you call a function and you send information to the function, you're calling it, the information that you're sending to that function, what is it called? There's a term used for that I wanted to make sure you guys were very familiar with.
The information that you're sending to a function.
Information that I'm sending to the function. When you have it in the call, the information in the call, which is this I right here, this index that's giving us these values. What do we?
Can I take a shot at it?
Sure, Will. What do you call it?
Integer.
Okay. But this is a name that would be used no matter what type of information we're sending. Okay. Anybody else got any idea? I'll just open up to everybody.
Yeah, I have like 2 ideas.
Okay.
Is it input?
Okay, not quite, because we would use input to bring in information from the user. It could be some input we got from the user. However, this uses a different name. So what's your second one?
I was gonna say index, but
Index.
I don't think that's right.
Okay. No, not necessarily. The index is usually something that we're using to look at. We're using that to look at a place, like what place we're at as we're progressing through a list or progressing through a series of values. The index tells us where we're at as we're moving along. It's like the address on a house, you know? If I gave you my address, you would be able to find my house pretty easily. So that index is like the address where we're looking for that value at that spot. So let me go ahead and give it to you guys.
Is it a Boolean?
No, that's a variable type. And no matter what variable type we're using, we're always going to call this information that we have here an argument. Okay? Yeah, it's an argument. So you'll also hear about, as we add more things that we're going to send out to our functions, like maybe we need to send out the first and last name separate, as well as the birth date. And we might send all this out to a function that's going to drop it into a table for us. And we want to make sure that the information gets into the right place. So in this case, we're going to send an argument. When we call it, like we have here with circle area, that's an argument. Okay, the information inside the parentheses. And later on, we'll talk about positional arguments and forcing arguments and things like that. So that's an argument. And then when we actually get up here to our function itself, where we're defining our function, giving it a name, we're saying, this is the information we have to pull in. Those are called what? Does anybody remember that one? the information when it's sitting up here in the actual function. What's that called? Maybe Camilla knows. Possibly.
I think I might know, but I don't think I do.
Well, go ahead. Everybody else has been wrong. It's not a big deal.
Um, oh my gosh,
No, that's okay. That's okay. Now, I haven't really heard anything from Daisy, so I want to throw it out there to Daisy just to see. Daisy, do you know what that's called? The information that we need to have for our function, where we're defining it?
Integer.
Integer. Okay, so a lot of the things you guys have been bringing up, integer, Boolean, string even, those are all variable types. Okay, great, good. We want to keep that in mind. However, in this case, we're looking at something that can talk about all of those types, something we're going to send, or something that we have to have for our function. Our function says, hey, if you call me, you better be sending this stuff too. You know, you probably got friends like, hey, if you're coming over, you better bring food. Okay, that's the function. You know, your friendship is based on food. If your friend is going to come over, he says, you better go order some pizza or else I ain't coming over. Okay, so that's the same way with this, and that is a parameter. Okay, so down here where we call it, that's an argument. Okay, up here when we're defining it and we're saying this is what we need to actually run this function, those are called parameters. Okay, so make sure you keep that straight. We're going to use that terminology a good bit. Okay, so that's our parameter. Up here, we're going to have numerous parameters being sent off to functions, but in this case, I just wanted to do one, just so you guys kind of keep things straight. As far as accessing the function, this is all you have to do to be able to do it. In fact, if most of the time, the thing that you don't want to do is kind of what I'm doing right here, but we're going to get away from this a little bit later. Usually with functions, I'm going to throw this out there. Usually with functions, you don't necessarily want it to print anything. You want it to do one thing, you want it to do it well, and you're wanting it to find something and feed a value back, okay? And in that case, you can do that. We can do that. I can change this print statement here to something else. So let me show you how we do that real quick. Usually, what we're going to want to do is, I should have left that on there. It's okay. There we go. Usually what you're going to want to do is return a value, okay? So return can be used right here. Return does not need these curly brackets around it because we're not using a formatted line or anything like that. If you wanted to put parentheses around it, just, you know, for your own sake, you know, your own sanity, that's fine. It shouldn't really have a problem with that. So right here, we'd send off to circle area. Now here's how this works. In the same place where you call it, you also want to use it, okay? So here's how we would do this. We put a print right here, and I'm going to make this formatted, and we're going to say the area of the circle is, and I'm just going to make this really fast, so bear with me. We'll do this. Same thing, we're still going to put it in curly brackets. Going to close our quotes, close all that. Now we have our print statement down here, and this is really more how you want this to work, okay? Since we're running through a for loop, this is still going to give us all of our information just like we see it below. We're going to see 8 different instances of this down here. We should see the values be the exact same. Let's see if I did this right without having to worry about any kind of errors. Okay, looks like we did it. We did our rounding up here in the function, and when it got down here and we called it, just like when we're asking a variable to show up in the same formatted line, we call it the exact same way, okay? We can do any kind of calculations inside of this space as well if we wanted to. We don't need to. It's already being handled up here inside of our function for circle area. So try to keep away from doing a print statement inside of a function if you can. If it's an error checking kind of thing, something that's looking for something that's wrong, I could see printing or returning a string back to your code saying like, oh, hey, this thing is wrong, and this is what we needed instead. We're going to start adding in some of that as we work towards this, learning about exceptions and error checking. So for now, the main thing is we want to try and return a value when we're working with a function. We don't want to use a print. Whenever we're calling our function, just throw this one out there. Whenever we're calling our function, the information we're going to send with that call is called what? Anybody. Anybody at all. Somebody who is writing in the notes. The information that we're using with it when we call our function. Will, you want to give it a shot? What's the information we send when we call our function?
I couldn't be sure.
Don't remember. Okay, we did go over this, so this is something we really need to hold on to. Brianna, do you remember? What's the information we send when we call our function? What's it called? Nothing from Brianna. How about Zanetta? Zanetta, what is the information called that we're going to send when we call our function?
I'm not sure.
Okay, this is disconcerting. Okay, this is something I took a little bit of time on to make sure everybody kind of understood what was going on here. Camilla, can you help us out? What is the information called that we send to our function when we call it? When we call our function, what is that information called?
What argument?
Argument, yes, thank you. Okay, great. All right, so we're starting to get that. What about up here? I'm just going to throw this one out there one more time. What is the information called whenever we're defining our function and saying, hey, this is the information I have to be able to run this function? What is that called? What is this called up here when we define it? Daisy, can you help us out there? What's this information that we have to have when we're defining our function up here? What's that information called?
I know you said it, but I just forgot the word.
Okay, like I said, hopefully you guys are taking notes here. Cameron, can you help us out?
I don't know either.
No, either. Oh man, I spent some time on this. That's disconcerting. Okay. Anybody else want to save our class? What's that information called up here when we're defining our function and we're saying this function has to have this information whenever we want to run it? It'll definitely give you an error if you don't. So actually it might give us, let me go ahead and take that out. Let's see if it gives us the error that we're looking for. All right. So since we have it right here, the error we're getting is missing one required positional argument, because that's where we would put it. We put it right here. Now, if I take it out of radius, if I take radius out, cut that out, and I run it again, now we're also getting a positional argument because it's looking at circle area, but it is called something different up when we're calling it, or sorry, when we're defining it up here.
Is it called a command?
No, it's not called a command. So see, it's looking at line 11, which it's actually finding fault here because it's seeing that we're passing something. But it's saying that circle area takes 0 positional arguments, but was given 1. But 1 was given. Okay, so it's usually going to relate.
It's a parameter, right?
It's a parameter. Yes, thank you so much.
I just remembered.
A parameter. Okay, so here it's an argument. Here it's a parameter. That's going to help you a lot as you debug your code, as you look at other people's code, as we talk about code. Keeping that information straight is going to make everything a lot easier for you. Okay? So let me run through the assignment one more time with you guys. Should be fairly straightforward at this point. It's not due until halfway through the class tomorrow, so you guys can ask questions if you want to. And then I will also be running on to new content tomorrow. Okay, we're going to be adding on to our functions and what we do with them. So let me go ahead and do a new share, which is going to go back to our assignment. Oop, there we are. And the thing you're going to have to do here, if you've taken notes, if you're watching what we're doing, this should be fairly easy. I think you guys would probably be able to knock this out in a very short amount of time. But make a function that's going to be able to put out this wording just like you see down here at the bottom. What type of looping structure are we probably going to use here?
For
loop, that's right. We know exactly how many names we're going to hit, so we can use a for loop here. The code should run through the list of names, and the function should print out their names with the welcome message. Now, that gives you two different ways you can do this. You can have the function print the names, or you can do it like I was saying, and you probably need to have it return a value, and you want to have it put it out in a string. So have it print, and then it's going to go through and put out the names. Now, the thing is that this isn't doing any calculations necessarily, so doing it inside the for loop doesn't make as much sense as doing it in the function in this case. So I would go ahead and just leave the print line up in the function. That's fine. We can do that. If you want to have it return the value, it's still just running through everything. If you wanted to do something with it, like maybe have it change all the letters to uppercase, or if you wanted to have it, you wanted to change the list into a first name and a last name so that it joined them together inside of the function. That's a way to go too. That's a possible way to change that up and make it a little more reasonable. Didn't want to go too far with you guys right away, so I didn't have two different lists coming together in the same space. Probably wouldn't have been too difficult, but if that's something you want to try, I can definitely give you some extra points for that. Okay, anybody have any questions about what the assignment is? Any questions about functions? Anything at all? Okay, if everybody's feeling good, give me a thumbs up and you're free to go.
I have a question.
Okay, Camilla, go ahead.
You just want us to print the names. You don't want to be able to type them in and then it print, right?
Right, it should be in a list. So much like how I had those numbers in a list inside of the example we were looking at, you can just copy and paste this list of names and then just add the quotes around each name to show that they're a string and have it put out those just like what we're seeing. The output should be just like what you see here in the assignment.
Okay.
There's no input.
I'm sorry, one more time.
There shouldn't be any input to this. You shouldn't have to input anything. It should just run.
Yeah, it just takes
Right.
information from the list. Yeah, there's no input on this one. We'll definitely do some input later, but not for this one today. Any other questions?
When you're putting a string together and you have it in quotes, do you put the quotes around the name and then a comma after the quotation marks?
That's right. That's right.
Perfect. That's my question.
Okay.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Okay. Anybody else any questions? If not, thumbs up and you guys are free to go.
So the coding that you just showed us and explained is just going to be like the same format as how we're going to set up this one?
It's going to be very similar. Yeah, very similar. Thank you, Daisy. Appreciate it.
Okay. Bye.
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 Bye. See ya. Okay.